Marcus Hale had everything. Millions in the bank, a mansion overlooking the Pacific, and a life most people could only dream of. But in one devastating moment, a car accident stole his ability to walk and shattered the carefully constructed world he'd built around his success. The wealthy friends who once surrounded him couldn't bear to look him in the eye. His fiancée Clara disappeared after 3 weeks of awkward visits, and Marcus found himself more alone than he'd ever imagined possible. That's when Emily Carter walked into his life, a quiet maid with warm eyes and a gentle voice who saw something in him that everyone else had missed. She made him a promise that seemed impossible. "I'll help you walk again." But what Marcus didn't know was that Emily was carrying secrets of her own, and helping him heal would force them both to confront truths about love, pride, and what it really means to stand on your own 2 feet. If you're ready to discover whether love can truly conquer all, hit that subscribe button and tell me what city you're watching from. I love connecting with viewers from around the world. The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of the oceanfront mansion, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Marcus Hale sat in his wheelchair, staring at the leather sofa just 3 feet away. 3 feet might as well have been 3 miles. He gripped the armrests of his chair and pushed himself forward, muscles straining as he attempted to transfer from the wheelchair to the couch. His arms shook with effort, almost there, just a little more. The transfer went wrong. Marcus felt his balance slip, his body tilting sideways. Time slowed as he realized he was falling. His shoulder hit the floor first, followed by the rest of his body with a dull thud that echoed through the spacious living room. "Mr. Hale?" Footsteps rushed toward him from different directions. The house staff had heard the fall. Marcus closed his eyes, heat flooding his face. 6 months since the accident, and he still couldn't manage something as simple as getting onto his own couch. "Sir, are you hurt? Should we call Dr. Grant? Maybe we should lift him." "Don't touch me," Marcus said through gritted teeth, his voice sharp with embarrassment. The staff froze, uncertain. He could feel their eyes on him, their pity thick in the air like fog. That's when he heard different footsteps, softer, more measured. "Everyone, please step back and give him some space." The voice was calm and gentle. Female. Marcus opened his eyes to see a woman with light brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore the standard gray uniform of the cleaning staff, but something about her was different. She wasn't looking at him the way the others did, like he was broken. Emily Carter knelt down beside him, careful to stay at eye level rather than towering over him. "Hi, Mr. Hale. I'm Emily. Are you hurt anywhere?" Marcus studied her face. She was maybe 26, with warm brown eyes that held no trace of the awkward sympathy he'd grown to hate. "No," he said quietly. "Just my pride." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "Pride heals faster than bones. May I help you get back to your chair?" The other staff members had retreated, sensing this woman had things under control. Marcus hesitated. He'd spent months pushing away help, insisting he could manage on his own. But something about Emily's steady presence made him nod. "I'm going to put my arm under your shoulders," she said. "Is that okay?" He nodded again. Her touch was firm but gentle as she helped him sit up. She moved with practiced ease, as if she'd done this before. "Your chair's right here," she said, positioning it beside him. "Take your time. There's no rush." Marcus placed his hands on the wheelchair's seat and lifted himself up with Emily's steady support. When he was settled, he looked up at her, unsettled by how normal she'd made the whole thing feel. "Thank you," he said, the words barely above a whisper. Emily straightened up and brushed an imaginary speck of dust from her uniform. "You're welcome, Mr. Hale." She paused. "The afternoon light is beautiful in here. I bet the view of the ocean is amazing from that couch." Marcus looked toward the sofa, then back at her. She wasn't offering to help him try again, wasn't pushing or coddling. She was simply acknowledging what he'd been trying to do. "It is," he said. Emily nodded and picked up her cleaning supplies from where she'd set them down. "I should get back to work. Have a good evening, Mr. Hale." She walked away, her footsteps fading down the hall. Marcus sat in his wheelchair for a long time after she left, staring at the empty space where she'd been. Something had shifted in those few minutes. For the first time in months, someone had helped him without making him feel helpless. That evening, Marcus ate dinner alone in the dining room, as had become his routine. The long mahogany table could seat 12, but it felt hollow with just him at one end. James, his cousin and assistant, usually joined him, but he was handling business calls tonight. Marcus pushed his food around his plate, his mind drifting back to the afternoon. He'd spent the last 6 months carefully constructing walls around himself. After the accident, the parade of visitors had been overwhelming. Friends who didn't know what to say, business associates who treated him like he was dying, women who suddenly saw him as a charity case. He'd built a life that required no one, a life where falling on the floor was his own problem to solve. But Emily hadn't looked at him like a problem. She'd looked at him like a person. The soft sound of footsteps in the hallway caught his attention. He glanced toward the doorway and saw Emily walking past, carrying a basket of laundry. She moved quietly, efficiently, like someone who understood the value of not being noticed. "Emily!" he called out. She stopped and backtracked to the doorway. "Yes, Mr. Hale? You don't have to call me that. Marcus is fine." She considered this. "Okay, Marcus." An awkward silence stretched between them. Marcus realized he'd called her over without knowing what he wanted to say. "How long have you worked here?" he asked finally. 3 months, she said. "I work for the cleaning service that comes twice a week. You've done this before. Helped someone who—" He gestured vaguely at his wheelchair. Emily's expression grew thoughtful. "My father had a stroke when I was 18. I took care of him for 3 years before he passed. I'm sorry." "Thank you." She shifted the laundry basket to her other hip. "It taught me that dignity matters more than independence sometimes." The words hit Marcus like a gentle slap. He'd been so focused on maintaining his independence that he'd forgotten about dignity. The way Emily had helped him that afternoon, it had felt dignified. "I've been thinking about what you said," Emily continued, "about the view from the couch." Marcus looked at her carefully. "And I think you could make it over there. You were almost there when you fell. Your technique was right, you just lost your balance at the end." Heat crept up Marcus's neck. "I don't need advice on how to transfer from my chair." Emily didn't flinch at his sharp tone. "You're right. I'm sorry, I just thought—" She trailed off, then took a small step forward. "My dad used to get so frustrated. The physical therapists would come with their exercises and their encouragement, but they'd leave after an hour. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who helped him figure out the little things that made the big things possible." Marcus stared at her. There was no pity in her voice, no condescension. Just a quiet understanding. "What are you saying?" he asked. Emily set down the laundry basket and looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm saying I'll help you walk again." The words hung in the air between them. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. Hope, maybe, or fear. He had heard similar promises from doctors and therapists, but they'd all been clinical, professional. This felt different, personal. "The doctors say I might never walk again," he said, testing her. "The doctor said my father would never speak again after his stroke. He died reciting poetry." Emily picked up her laundry basket. "But I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm just telling you what I believe." She turned to leave, then paused. "Good night, Marcus." After she left, Marcus sat alone in the dining room for another hour. Her words echoed in his mind. "I'll help you walk again." It was ridiculous, impossible. He was a millionaire who could afford the best doctors, the most advanced equipment, the most experienced physical therapists. What could a maid possibly offer that they couldn't? But as he wheeled himself to his bedroom that night, Marcus couldn't shake the memory of how it felt when Emily helped him up from the floor. For just a moment, he hadn't felt broken. Marcus spent a restless night staring at the ceiling. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Emily's voice. "I'll help you walk again." The hope in those words terrified him more than the accident had. Hope was dangerous. Hope was what had gotten him through the first month in the hospital, through the surgery, through the grueling early days of physical therapy. Hope was what had been crushed when doctor after doctor delivered the same verdict. The damage to his spinal cord was too severe. He might regain some sensation, some movement, but walking was unlikely. Marcus had built his fortune by being realistic about odds and outcomes. Hope was for people who couldn't afford better options. By morning, he'd made his decision. He would avoid Emily Carter. But when he wheeled into the kitchen for breakfast, she was already there, wiping down the counters with quiet efficiency. "Good morning, Marcus," she said without looking up from her work. "Morning," he replied stiffly, maneuvering his chair to the breakfast bar. James appeared from the back hallway, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly as he spoke to someone about quarterly projections. He gave Marcus a quick nod and continued pacing. Emily finished cleaning the counter and moved toward the door, but then she stopped and turned back. "I brought something for you," she said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on the counter near his elbow. "Just some exercises, things that help my father." Marcus glanced down at the paper but didn't touch it. "I have a physical therapist." "I know. Dr. Grant seems very knowledgeable." Emily's voice remained neutral. "These are just extras, small things you can do when he's not here." She started to leave again, then stopped. "You don't have to use them, but they're there if you want them." After she left, Marcus stared at the folded paper for 10 minutes before finally picking it up. The exercises were written in neat handwriting, basic stretches, balance work, simple movements he could do from his chair. At the bottom, she'd written a short note. "These aren't about walking. They're about feeling strong." Despite himself, Marcus found the distinction interesting. Every therapy session focused on the ultimate goal of mobility. Emily seemed to understand that strength had value on its own. James finished his call and grabbed a cup of coffee. "Everything okay? You look like you're thinking hard about something." "The new maid," Marcus said. "Emily. What do you know about her?" James raised an eyebrow. "Not much. She works for Coastal Cleaning Services. Been here a few months. Quiet, does good work." "Why?" Marcus folded the paper and slipped it into his pocket. "Just curious." That afternoon, alone in his room, Marcus unfolded Emily's note again. The exercises looked simple. Enough. Almost too simple. But something about the way she'd presented them, not as therapy but as a gift, made him want to try. He started with the first stretch, a gentle movement designed to improve circulation in his legs. As he worked through the list, he was surprised to find that the exercises felt different from his official therapy sessions, less clinical, more personal. When Emily appeared in his doorway an hour later, he was in the middle of the third exercise. "How do they feel?" she asked quietly. Marcus looked up, caught. He'd been so focused that he hadn't heard her approach. "Different," he admitted. Emily stepped into the room. "Different how?" "Like they're mine, not something being done to me." She smiled. The first full smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and more radiant. "That's exactly right." They looked at each other for a moment, and Marcus felt something shift between them. A recognition, maybe, an understanding. "Would you like me to help you with the balance work?" Emily asked. "It's easier with someone to steady you." Every instinct told Marcus to say no. He'd spent months avoiding this exact situation, being dependent on someone else's help. But Emily's presence felt different from the parade of professionals who'd worked with him. She wasn't there because she was being paid to care. She was there because she chose to be. "Okay," he said quietly. Emily moved behind his wheelchair and gently placed her hands on his shoulders. "Just try to sit as straight as possible. Don't worry about falling. I've got you." Marcus straightened his spine, feeling the gentle pressure of her hands. For the first time in months, someone was touching him without gloves, without clinical detachment. It was just human contact, simple and warm. "Good," Emily said. "Now try to lift your arms out to your sides." He raised his arms, concentrating on balance. Emily's hands remained steady on his shoulders, a constant reassurance that he was safe. "Now close your eyes." "What?" "Trust me, just for a few seconds." Marcus hesitated, then closed his eyes. The world disappeared, except for the feeling of Emily's hands and the awareness of his own body in space. For a brief moment, he forgot about the wheelchair, forgot about the limitations. He was just a man working to feel strong. When he opened his eyes, Emily was watching him with quiet satisfaction. "How was that?" she asked. "Good," Marcus said, surprised by how much he meant it. "Really good." Emily stepped back. "Same time tomorrow?" Marcus nodded before he could stop himself. "Same time tomorrow." After she left, Marcus sat in his room feeling something he hadn't experienced in months: anticipation. Not for some distant, impossible goal, but for tomorrow afternoon. For Emily's hands on his shoulders and the feeling of being strong, even if it was just for a few minutes. It was a small thing, but for the first time since the accident, small felt like enough. The next morning brought unexpected news. Marcus was reviewing financial reports when James knocked on his office door. "There's someone here to see you," James said, his expression carefully neutral. "Who?" "Clara Reed." Marcus felt his stomach drop. Clara, his ex-girlfriend, ex-fiancée, ex-everything. They'd been together for 2 years before the accident, and she'd tried to stay afterward. For about 3 weeks. "Tell her I'm not available." "I did. She said she'd wait." Marcus closed his laptop with more force than necessary. "How long has she been out there?" 20 minutes. Clara had always been persistent. It was one of the things that had attracted him to her initially. Her determination, her refusal to take no for an answer. Now it felt like a character flaw. "Fine. Send her in." Clara entered his office like she belonged there, all flowing blonde hair and designer clothes that probably cost more than most people made in a month. She'd always been beautiful, but there was something harder about her now, more polished. "Hello, Marcus." She leaned down to kiss his cheek, and he caught a whiff of her expensive perfume. "Clara, this is unexpected." She settled into the chair across from his desk, crossing her legs with practiced elegance. "I was in town for a charity luncheon. I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." "I'm doing fine." "Are you?" She looked around the office, taking in the modifications that had been made for his wheelchair, the lowered desk, the wider doorways, the ramp. "This place looks different." "Things change." Clara leaned forward slightly. "I heard you're doing physical therapy again. That's wonderful news." Marcus wondered who'd told her that. Probably someone from their old social circle, the group of wealthy 30-somethings who'd made up their life before the accident. He realized he hadn't missed any of them. "I'm working with a therapist, yes." "Dr. Grant?" Marcus nodded, unsurprised that she knew. Clara had always made it her business to know things. "He has an excellent reputation, very realistic about outcomes." She paused. "I think that's important, don't you? Being realistic about what's possible." The words stung, though Marcus wasn't sure why. Clara wasn't wrong. Dr. Grant was realistic, almost brutally so. But something about hearing it from Clara's lips made it sound cold. "Yes," he said simply. They talked for another 20 minutes about mutual acquaintances and charity events and the gallery opening Clara was planning to attend next week. It was the kind of conversation they used to have regularly, light and social, and ultimately meaningless. As Clara prepared to leave, she stood and smoothed down her skirt. "It's good to see you, Marcus. You look settled." "Settled?" Comfortable, like you've accepted things." She picked up her purse. "I think that's healthy. Sometimes the best thing we can do is stop fighting reality and just make peace with where we are." After Clara left, Marcus sat alone in his office, her words echoing in his mind. Make peace with where we are. 6 months ago, that might have sounded like wisdom. Now it sounded like giving up. He thought about Emily's note in his pocket, about her hands on his shoulders the day before, about the way she'd said, "I'll help you walk again," like it was a simple fact rather than an impossible dream. Clara represented his old life, beautiful, polished, realistic. Emily represented something else entirely, something that felt dangerous and hopeful and real. That afternoon, when Emily appeared in his doorway at the usual time, Marcus was already warmed up, already working through the exercises she'd given him. "You're early," she observed, settling into the chair beside him. "I was thinking about what you said yesterday, about feeling strong." Emily nodded. "And?" "I want to try standing." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. Emily studied his face carefully. "Are you sure? We can work up to that." "I'm sure." Emily positioned his wheelchair next to the bed and locked the brakes. "Put your hands here," she said, indicating the armrests. "I'm going to support you from behind. If you feel unsteady at all, just sit back down." Marcus gripped the armrests and pushed himself up. His legs shook with the effort, muscles that had grown weak over the months of disuse struggling to support his weight. Emily's hands were firm on his back, steadying him. For maybe 3 seconds, Marcus Hale stood on his own 2 feet. It wasn't much. His legs were trembling, his balance was precarious, and he had to sit back down almost immediately. But for those 3 seconds, he was standing. Emily's eyes were bright when he looked at her. How did that feel? Terrifying, Marcus said honestly. And amazing. Good, Emily said. That's exactly how it should feel. As Marcus settled back into his wheelchair, he realized something had changed, not in his legs, not in his prognosis, but in his understanding of what was possible. Clara had been wrong. He wasn't ready to make peace with where he was, not yet. Same time tomorrow? Emily asked. Same time tomorrow, Marcus confirmed. But this time, when she left, Marcus didn't just feel anticipation. He felt something much more dangerous, hope. 1 week later, the routine had become sacred. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, Emily would appear in Marcus's doorway with her quiet smile and steady presence. The exercises had evolved from simple stretches to more challenging balance work, and Marcus found himself looking forward to their sessions with an intensity that surprised him. Today felt different, though. Marcus had managed to stand for nearly 10 seconds the day before, and both of them could feel the progress building like momentum. Emily entered his room carrying a small notebook. I've been keeping track, she said, showing him pages filled with neat handwriting. Your standing time, which exercises work best, how your balance is improving. Marcus studied the pages, impressed by the detail. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Emily sat in the chair beside his bed. My father taught me that progress is hard to see day by day, but easy to see week by week if you write it down. She was right. Looking at her notes, Marcus could see patterns he'd missed. Days when he was stronger, movements that came easier, small victories that had felt insignificant in the moment, but added up to something meaningful over time. According to this, Emily said, pointing to a chart she'd drawn, you're ready to try walking with support. Marcus felt his heart rate spike. Walking? Just a step or two, with me holding on. Emily's voice was calm, reassuring. What do you think? Marcus looked at his legs, still and unresponsive in his wheelchair. 6 months ago, he'd been training for a marathon. Now the idea of taking a single step felt like climbing a mountain. Okay, he said quietly. Let's try. Emily positioned herself beside his wheelchair and helped him stand. His legs shook as they always did, but today the trembling felt different, less like weakness, more like anticipation. I'm going to put your arm over my shoulders, Emily said. Hold on to me as tight as you need to. Marcus draped his arm across Emily's shoulders, surprised by how solid and steady she felt. She was smaller than him, but there was strength in her frame that spoke of years spent caring for others. Now, Emily said, just think about lifting your right foot. Don't worry about where it goes, just lift it. Marcus focused all his attention on his right leg. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he felt his foot lift off the ground. Good, Emily whispered. Now set it down a little bit forward. Marcus concentrated harder than he'd ever concentrated on anything in his life. His foot moved forward maybe 6 inches before settling back on the floor. I did it, he said, his voice filled with wonder. You did it, Emily confirmed. One more? They repeated the process with his left foot. This time, Marcus could feel the weight shifting between his legs, could sense his body remembering movements it had performed thousands of times before the accident. When they finished, Marcus was exhausted, but exhilarated. Emily helped him back into his wheelchair, and they sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. How do you know so much about this? Marcus asked eventually. Emily was quiet for a long moment. Taking care of my father wasn't just about helping him walk again. It was about helping him remember who he was. The stroke took away his speech, his mobility, his independence. But it couldn't take away his spirit unless he let it. She looked at Marcus directly. You have the same spirit he did. You just forgot for a while. Something in her. Words made Marcus's chest tight with emotion he didn't expect. Emily! Mr. Hale? James's voice came from the doorway. Sorry to interrupt, but Dr. Grant is here for your appointment. Emily stood quickly, smoothing down her uniform. I should go, See you tomorrow, Marcus. She slipped past James and Dr. Grant as they entered the room. Marcus watched her go, wishing he could call her back. Dr. Grant was a practical man in his 50s who believed in honest assessments and realistic goals. He'd been working with Marcus for 3 months, and their sessions were efficient but uninspiring. "How are you feeling today?" Dr. Grant asked, setting up his equipment. "Good. Actually, really good." Dr. Grant raised an eyebrow. "Any particular reason?" Marcus hesitated. He wasn't sure how to explain Emily's methods to a medical professional. "I've been doing some extra exercises." "What kind of exercises?" Marcus described the work he'd been doing with Emily, carefully avoiding mention of her specifically. Dr. Grant listened with professional interest. "Standing work is good," he said finally, "but don't get your hopes up too high. The improvement you're seeing now might plateau." "But what if it doesn't?" Dr. Grant's expression grew gentle but firm. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. Your injury was severe. The fact that you're regaining some sensation and movement is wonderful. But walking independently again," he shook his head. "I don't want to see you get hurt by unrealistic expectations." After Dr. Grant left, Marcus sat alone in his room, the doctor's words weighing heavily on his mind. This was exactly why he'd tried to avoid hope in the first place. Hope led to disappointment, and disappointment was harder to bear than acceptance. But as he thought about the feeling of his feet moving forward, of Emily's steady presence beside him, Marcus realized something had changed. He wasn't hoping for a miracle anymore. He was working toward progress, one small step at a time. The next morning, Marcus found Emily in the kitchen earlier than usual, packing cleaning supplies into her bag. "You're here early," he observed. Emily looked up, startled. "Oh, hi. Yes, I wanted to get started before the dinner party preparations begin." Marcus frowned. "Dinner party?" "Tonight. James mentioned it yesterday. 8 guests?" Marcus had completely forgotten. James had arranged a small dinner party with some business associates, trying to ease Marcus back into social situations. The thought of entertaining made his stomach clench with anxiety. "Right," Marcus said. "I forgot." Emily studied his face. "You don't look happy about it." "I don't exactly enjoy dinner parties these days." Marcus gestured at his wheelchair. "Hard to work the room when you're 3 feet tall." Emily finished packing her bag and leaned against the counter. "My father used to say something about that." "What?" "He said the people worth knowing will sit down to meet you at your level. The people who won't weren't worth knowing anyway." Marcus considered this. "Your father sounds like he was a wise man." "He was." Emily's smile was soft with memory. "He also said that hiding from people who make you uncomfortable doesn't make the discomfort go away. It just makes the world smaller." Before Marcus could respond, Emily glanced at her watch. "I should get to work." "But Marcus," she met his eyes, "try to enjoy tonight. You might be surprised." By evening, Marcus's anxiety about the dinner party had reached a fever pitch. He'd changed clothes 3 times, practiced maneuvering his wheelchair around the dining room table, and rehearsed responses to the inevitable awkward questions about his condition. James had invited 4 business associates and their wives, people Marcus had known for years but hadn't seen since the accident. As they arrived, the familiar dance of discomfort began. "Marcus, you look—" The pause was always the same, searching for the right word. "You look well." "Great to see you. How are you managing?" The conversations were stilted, full of careful tiptoeing around the obvious changes in his life. Marcus found himself retreating into polite responses and safe topics, watching the evening from a distance even though he was sitting at the head of his own table. During the main course, conversation turned to a charity golf tournament that several of the guests were organizing. "You should come out and watch, Marcus," said David, one of his oldest business contacts. "It'll be good to get you out of the house." "Thanks, but I don't really do spectator sports anymore." "Oh, come on," David's wife chimed in with forced cheerfulness. "Fresh air would be good for you. You could watch from the cart." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The cart, like he was cargo to be hauled around the golf course. "Maybe," he said noncommittally. As the evening wore on, Marcus realized Emily had been wrong about one thing. These people weren't sitting down to meet him at his level. They were talking down to him from their full height, their voices just a little too loud, their smiles just a little too bright. After the guests left, Marcus sat alone in his study, emotionally drained. The evening had been exactly what he'd expected, a reminder of everything he'd lost, delivered with well-meaning condescension. A soft knock on the door interrupted his brooding. "Come in." To his surprise, Emily entered carrying a cup of tea. She'd changed out of her cleaning uniform into jeans and a simple sweater, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. "I thought you might want this," she said, setting the tea on his desk. "Chamomile. It helps with stress." "Thank you. I thought you'd left hours ago." "I was finishing up in the kitchen when your guests were leaving. You looked like you needed some time to decompress." Marcus took a sip of the tea, grateful for its warmth. "It was exactly what I expected it to be." Emily settled into the chair across from his desk. "That bad?" They meant well, but Marcus struggled to find the words. They looked at me like I was broken, like something to be managed or accommodated. "And how did that make you feel?" The question was simple, but it cut straight to the heart of what Marcus had been avoiding all evening. "Small," he admitted. "Invisible. Like I wasn't really there." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "My father went through something similar after his stroke. People would visit and talk about him like he wasn't in the room, or they'd speak louder, like his hearing had gone instead of his speech." "How did he handle it?" "At first he didn't. He stopped wanting visitors, stopped going out, but then one day he got angry." Emily's eyes sparked with memory. "Really angry. And that anger gave him something to push against." Marcus set down his teacup. "What do you mean?" "He decided he wasn't going to let other people's discomfort define his worth, so he started making them uncomfortable right back." Despite his mood, Marcus found himself smiling. "How?" "He'd roll his wheelchair right up to people who were avoiding eye contact. He'd ask direct questions about things they were pretending not to notice. He made it impossible for them to treat him like he was invisible." "Did it work?" "Some people couldn't handle it and stopped coming around, but the people who stayed, they learned to see him as he was, not as what he'd lost." Marcus considered this. Emily was suggesting something radical, not accepting other people's discomfort, but challenging it. "You think I should have made my guests more uncomfortable tonight?" Emily shrugged. "I think you should decide what kind of person you want to be in that chair. Someone who apologizes for taking up space, or someone who takes up exactly as much space as he needs." Her words hit Marcus like a gentle slap. He'd been so focused on making other people comfortable with his disability that he'd made himself disappear. "Emily," he said quietly, "why do you care so much about this, about helping me?" She was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus thought she might not answer. Then she looked at him directly. "Because you remind me of my father before he found his anger. You're strong and intelligent and capable, but you're letting other people's fear make you small." She paused. "And because I believe in the person you were before the accident. That person is still there. He just needs to remember how to take up space." Something shifted in Marcus's chest, like a door opening that had been locked for months. Emily saw him, not the man in the wheelchair, not the victim of a tragic accident, but him, Marcus, the person he'd been and could still be. "Thank you," he said, meaning it more deeply than he'd meant anything in a long time. Emily stood to leave. "Same time tomorrow? I think you're ready to try walking a longer distance." "Same time tomorrow," Marcus confirmed. After she left, Marcus sat in his study for another hour, thinking about what she'd said, about taking up space, about pushing back against other people's discomfort, about the anger that could become strength if he let it. For the first time since the accident, Marcus began to think about who he wanted to become, not just who he used to be. The breakthrough came 3 days later. Marcus had been working with Emily every afternoon, gradually increasing the distance he could walk with her support. Today they'd made it from his wheelchair to the window, nearly 10 steps, before his legs gave out. "That was amazing," Emily said as she helped him back to his chair. "You're getting stronger every day." Marcus was breathing hard from the effort, but he felt exhilarated rather than exhausted. "It's because of you," he said. "Your father's exercises, your encouragement." "No," Emily's voice was firm. "It's because of you. I'm just the person holding on while you do the work." Something in her tone made Marcus look at her more carefully. "Emily?" Is everything okay? She was quiet for a moment, then sat down heavily in the chair beside him. Can I ask you something? Of course. What happens when you don't need me anymore? The question caught Marcus off guard. What do you mean? I mean, you're getting stronger. Eventually, you won't need someone to hold on to while you walk. You won't need the exercises or the encouragement. Emily's voice grew softer. What happens to me then? Marcus stared at her, suddenly understanding something he'd been too focused on his own progress to see. Emily, are you worried I'll let you go? I'm worried I'll disappear, she said quietly. It's what I do. I help people, and then when they don't need help anymore, I become invisible. That won't happen. It happened with my father, Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Toward the end, when he was getting better, he didn't want me hovering anymore. He wanted to feel independent again. I understood that, but she trailed off. But you felt abandoned, Marcus finished. Emily nodded, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. I know it's selfish. I was happy he was getting better. But I also didn't know who I was if I wasn't taking care of someone. Marcus reached out and took her hand, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. Emily, look at me. She raised her eyes to meet his. You're not disappearing. And this isn't just about you helping me walk again. Marcus struggled to find the right words. You've helped me remember who I am, not just physically but emotionally. You've made me feel like a person again, instead of a problem to be solved. Emily's hand was warm in his, and Marcus realized they'd crossed some invisible line between caregiver and patient, between helper and friend. Besides, he added with a small smile, even when I can walk on my own, I'm still going to need someone to remind me to take up space. Emily laughed through her tears. I think you're remembering that just fine on your own. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, hands still connected. Marcus became aware of how close they were sitting, how easy it would be to lean forward and kiss her. The thought surprised him with its intensity, but before he could act on the impulse, James appeared in the doorway. Marcus, sorry to interrupt, but your mother's on the phone. Emily quickly pulled her hand away and stood up. I should let you take that call. Emily, wait. But she was already gone, leaving Marcus with the lingering warmth of her touch and the uncomfortable awareness that his feelings for her had shifted into something much more complicated than gratitude. That evening, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about the moment when he'd wanted to kiss Emily. It had felt natural, right, but also terrifying. She was his employee, technically. She was helping him recover. Getting romantically involved would complicate everything. But as he replayed their conversation, Marcus realized Emily's fears mirrored his own. She was worried about becoming invisible when he no longer needed her help. He was worried about what would happen when the structured routine of their therapy sessions ended. Would she still want to be around him when he wasn't a project to be fixed? A knock on his bedroom door interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Emily entered, looking hesitant. She'd changed back into her cleaning uniform, but something about her posture suggested this wasn't a professional visit. I wanted to apologize, she said, for earlier. I shouldn't have made my worries your problem. Don't apologize. I'm glad you told me. Emily fidgeted with the sleeve of her uniform. I also wanted to say something else. Marcus waited. When I told you I'd help you walk again, I meant it as a promise to you. But somewhere along the way, it became important to me too, maybe too important. What are you saying? Emily took a deep breath. I'm saying maybe I need to step back. Let Dr. Grant take over completely. Make sure I'm helping you for the right reasons. Panic flared in Marcus's chest. Emily, no, please don't. Marcus, her voice was gentle but firm. I can't be your physical therapist and your friend. It's not fair to either of us. Marcus stared at her, understanding dawning slowly. She was right, of course. The lines between professional and personal had blurred so gradually that neither of them had noticed until today. So, what are you suggesting? I think we should take a break from the sessions, give you some time to work with Dr. Grant, give me some time to figure out what I want. And then what? Emily's smile was sad but hopeful. And then maybe we can figure out what this is when it's not about you needing me to help you walk. Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to tell her that he'd rather have her as his therapist than not. have her at all. But deep down, he knew she was right. What had started as a professional relationship had become something else entirely, and continuing to pretend otherwise would only hurt them both. "Okay," he said quietly. "If that's what you think is best." Emily nodded, tears bright in her eyes. "I'll still be here twice a week with the cleaning service, but no more therapy sessions." "I understand." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Marcus, for what it's worth, I think you're going to keep getting stronger, with or without me." After she left, Marcus sat alone in his room, feeling like he'd lost something precious before he'd even fully understood what it was. But underneath the sadness, there was also something else: respect for Emily's wisdom and courage in recognizing what he'd been too afraid to see. If they were going to have a chance at something real, it couldn't be built on his need for her help. It had to be built on something deeper than dependency. The question was whether what they felt for each other could survive without the structure of their daily sessions to hold it together. Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to find out, but Emily had made the choice for both of them. Now all he could do was trust that she was right about the walking, about the independence, and about whatever might be possible between them when he no longer needed rescuing. 2 weeks without Emily felt like 2 months. Marcus continued his sessions with Dr. Grant, who was pleased with the progress but remained cautiously optimistic about long-term outcomes. The clinical approach felt hollow after Emily's warmth and encouragement. Dr. Grant focused on measurements and benchmarks. Emily had focused on how Marcus felt. "You're showing good improvement in your lower extremity strength," Dr. Grant said during their Tuesday session. "Let's try walking with the parallel bars today." Marcus gripped the metal bars and managed to take 8 steps before his legs gave out. It was progress, measurable, documented progress. But without Emily there to celebrate the small victory, it felt empty. "Excellent work," Dr. Grant said, making notes on his clipboard. "I think we can increase your sessions to 3 times a week." Marcus nodded absently. Through the window, he could see Emily's car in the driveway. It was Thursday, one of her cleaning days. He'd seen her twice since their conversation, both times from a distance. She'd been polite but professional when their paths crossed, treating him exactly like what he was, a client of the cleaning service. It was what they had agreed on, but it hurt more than Marcus had expected. After Dr. Grant left, Marcus found himself wheeling through the house aimlessly. He passed the kitchen where Emily was working, her back to him as she organized the pantry. She was humming softly, something he'd never noticed when they were focused on therapy. "Emily?" She turned, surprised. "Oh, hi, Marcus. How was your session with Dr. Grant?" "Good. Fine." He paused. "How are you?" "I'm well, thank you." Her voice was carefully neutral. "Is there something you need?" The formality in her tone stung. This was worse than when they'd first met. Then she'd been professional, but warm. Now she was professional, but distant. "No," Marcus said quietly. "I just wanted to say hello." Emily nodded and turned back to her work. Marcus sat there for another moment, hoping she'd turn around again, hoping for some sign of the connection they'd shared. When it didn't come, he wheeled away feeling more alone than he had since the accident. James found Marcus in his study that evening, staring out the window at the ocean. "You've been quiet lately," James observed, settling into the chair across from Marcus's desk. "Just thinking." "About Emily?" Marcus looked at his cousin sharply. "What makes you say that?" James smiled. "You mean besides the fact that you've been moping around the house like a lovesick teenager ever since she stopped doing your therapy sessions?" "I have not been moping." "Marcus, you ate breakfast in your room 3 times this week just to avoid the kitchen when she's working." Marcus couldn't argue with that. "It's complicated." "How complicated can it be? You like her, she likes you." "You don't know that she likes me." James gave him a look that suggested he was being deliberately obtuse. "Marcus, I've seen the way she looks at you, or used to look at you before you both decided to pretend nothing happened between you." Marcus turned his wheelchair to face James fully. "Nothing did happen between us. Maybe not physically, but emotionally? Come on. You were falling for each other, and everyone in this house could see it except you two." The words hit closer to home than Marcus wanted to admit. Even if that's true, she was right to step back. The whole thing was built on dependency. Me needing her help. Was it, though? James leaned forward. Because from where I was standing, it looked like she needed you just as much as you needed her. Maybe in different ways, but still. Marcus considered this. He'd been so focused on his own vulnerability that he hadn't fully considered Emily's. She'd told him about feeling invisible, about disappearing when people no longer needed her care. Maybe helping him had filled a need in her life too. So what are you suggesting? Marcus asked. I'm suggesting you figure out what you want and then go after it like you used to go after business deals, with confidence and clarity. And if she doesn't want the same thing, then at least you'll know. But this limbo you're both in isn't working for anybody. After James left, Marcus sat alone with his thoughts. His cousin was right about one thing. The current situation wasn't sustainable. Seeing Emily twice a week but maintaining careful distance was torture for both of them. But Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to risk the fragile connection they still had by pushing for something more. What if James was wrong? What if Emily's feelings had been purely professional all along? The questions kept him awake most of the night. The answer came from an unexpected source. Marcus was working in his study the next afternoon when he heard a car door slam in the driveway. Through the window, he saw a middle-aged woman he didn't recognize walking toward the front door. She had Emily's warm brown eyes, but a harder set to her jaw. The doorbell rang, and Marcus heard James answer it. I'm looking for Emily Carter, the woman said. I'm her mother. Marcus wheeled closer to his office door, straining to hear the conversation. She's working right now, James replied politely. May I tell her you're here? Yes, please. Tell her it's important. A few minutes later, Marcus heard Emily's footsteps in the hallway, followed by hushed voices near the front door. He couldn't make out the words, but Emily's mother sounded upset about something. 20 minutes later, there was a soft knock on his office door. Come in, Emily entered, her face pale and her eyes red-rimmed. Marcus, I'm sorry to bother you, but I need to leave early today. There's a family emergency. Of course. Is everything okay? Emily hesitated. My mother, she's been having some health issues. She needs to go to the hospital for tests, and she's scared to go alone. Is there anything I can do to help? The offer seemed to surprise Emily. No, but thank you. I wanted you to know why I was leaving. Marcus studied her face, seeing the worry and exhaustion there. Emily, take as much time as you need. Family comes first. She nodded gratefully. I'll be back on Tuesday as scheduled. Don't worry about Tuesday. Take care of your mother. After Emily left, Marcus found himself thinking about what James had said about him going after what he wanted with confidence and clarity. Emily was dealing with a family crisis, scared about her mother's health, probably feeling overwhelmed and alone. This wasn't about romance or relationships or sorting out complicated feelings. This was about being a friend to someone who needed one. Marcus picked up his phone and called his personal physician, Dr. Sarah Chen. Sarah, it's Marcus Hale. I need a favor. 2 hours later, Marcus arrived at the county hospital in his modified Mercedes. He'd called ahead to find out where Emily's mother was being seen, and Dr. Chen had made some calls to ensure they'd receive the best possible care. Marcus found Emily in the waiting room of the cardiology department, sitting alone on an uncomfortable plastic chair. She looked small and exhausted. Marcus? She stood up quickly, confusion clear on her face. What are you doing here? I thought you might want some company. Emily's eyes filled with tears. You didn't have to come. I wanted to. They sat together in the waiting room, not talking much but drawing comfort from each other's presence. When the cardiologist finally came out to speak with them, Marcus was impressed by Dr. Chen's colleague. Thorough, compassionate, taking time to explain everything in terms Emily and her mother could understand. The tests show some irregularities, but nothing immediately life-threatening, the doctor explained. We'll need to do some follow-up appointments and possibly adjust her medications, but she should be fine with proper care. Emily sagged with relief. Thank you. Can I see her now? Of course. She's asking for you. Emily turned to Marcus. Would you like to meet her? Marcus was surprised by the invitation. Are you sure? I'm sure. Helen Carter was awake and alert when they entered her hospital room, though she looked tired. She was smaller than Marcus had expected, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mom, this is Marcus Hale," Emily said. "He's the one I work for." Helen studied Marcus with frank curiosity. "The one you've been helping with physical therapy?" Emily's cheeks flushed. "Yes." "I see." Helen's gaze shifted between them, and Marcus got the distinct impression he was being evaluated. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Hale. Emily shouldn't have to handle this alone." "It's Marcus, please, and Emily isn't alone." Something in his tone seemed to satisfy Helen. She nodded once as if he'd passed some test. They stayed for another hour until Helen was settled and comfortable, and Emily was satisfied that her mother was receiving good care. As they walked to the parking garage together, Emily was quiet. "Thank you," she said finally, "for coming, for making those calls to get her seen by the best cardiologist. You didn't have to do any of that." "Yes, I did," Marcus said simply. Emily stopped walking and looked at him. "Why?" Marcus met her eyes. "Because you matter to me, Emily. Not as my therapist, not as someone who works in my house. You matter to me as a person, and when people matter to you, you show up for them." Emily's breath caught. "Marcus, I know we agreed to keep things professional. I know we decided to step back, but I can't pretend I don't care about you." They stood in the fluorescent lighting of the hospital parking garage, the institutional surroundings somehow making the moment feel more real rather than less. "I care about you too," Emily said quietly. "That's why I stepped back, because I was scared I was caring about you for the wrong reasons." "And now?" Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Now I think maybe the reasons don't matter as much as the caring itself." Marcus felt something shift in his chest, like a door opening. "Emily, when you're ready, when your mother is settled and you've had time to process everything, would you like to have dinner with me? Not as my employee, not as my therapist, just as Emily and Marcus." Emily's smile was the first genuinely happy expression he'd seen from her in 2 weeks. "I'd like that very much." As they parted ways in the parking garage, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months. Hope that wasn't dependent on his ability to walk, but on his ability to connect with another person as an equal. 3 days later, Emily knocked on Marcus's office door at 7 in the evening. "Come in." She entered wearing a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders. Marcus was struck again by how beautiful she was. Not magazine, beautiful like Clara, but beautiful in a way that felt real and accessible and warm. "You look lovely," he said. "Thank you. You look pretty good yourself." Marcus had agonized over what to wear, finally settling on dark jeans and a button-down shirt. Casual, but not sloppy. The kind of thing he might have worn on a date before the accident, when such things seemed simple. "So," Emily said, settling into the chair across from his desk, "where are we having dinner?" Marcus smiled. "That depends. How do you feel about takeout?" "I love takeout." "Good, because I ordered from that Italian place downtown. It should be here in 20 minutes. Emily looked confused. "We're eating here?" "On the terrace, actually. I thought it might be nice to watch the sunset over the ocean." Marcus had spent the afternoon preparing. The terrace had been set with a small table and 2 chairs, candles and hurricane lamps to protect them from the ocean breeze, and a view of the Pacific that money couldn't buy. When the food arrived, they wheeled out onto the terrace together. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "This is beautiful," Emily said, settling into her chair. "I hoped you'd like it." They talked easily over dinner, conversation flowing as naturally as it had during their therapy sessions, but without the underlying tension of professional boundaries. Emily told him about her mother's follow-up appointment. Good news, the medication adjustment was working. Marcus told her about his progress with Dr. Grant. Also good news, he'd walked 15 steps with the parallel bars. "I'm proud of you," Emily said when he mentioned his progress. "Are you surprised?" Emily considered this. "No, not surprised. I always knew you could do it. I just wasn't sure you believed you could." "I didn't," Marcus admitted. "Not until you showed me that progress didn't have to mean going from wheelchair to marathon runner overnight, that it could mean standing for 3 seconds, or taking 1 step, or just feeling strong." "And now?" Marcus looked out at the ocean, then back at Emily. Now I believe in a lot of things I didn't believe in before." The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the terrace. Emily reached across the table and took Marcus's hand. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For what?" "For stepping back the way I did. For making it seem like caring about you was a mistake." Marcus turned his hand over so their palms were touching. "You were protecting yourself. I understand that. Maybe, but I was also protecting myself from something that might have been worth the risk." "And now?" Emily's smile was soft and sure. "Now I'd like to find out." Marcus lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles gently. "I'd like that too." They sat on the terrace until the stars came out, talking and laughing and slowly, carefully, building something new together, something that wasn't based on need or dependency or one person fixing another, something that was just Emily and Marcus choosing each other with clear eyes and open hearts. When Emily finally left that night, Marcus sat on the terrace alone for another hour, feeling more hopeful about the future than he had since before the accident. Not because he might walk again, though he believed now that he would, but because he'd found someone who saw him exactly as he was and chose to stay anyway. It was, he thought, the best kind of healing there was. 2 months later, Marcus stood in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. Tonight was the charity gala that Clara had mentioned during her visit, the same social circle, the same people who had made him feel invisible at his own dinner party. But this time, everything was different. This time, Emily would be with him. A soft knock interrupted his preparations. "Come in." Emily entered, and Marcus's breath caught. She wore a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her hair swept up to show the graceful line of her neck. She looked nervous but determined. "You look incredible," Marcus said. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." Emily walked closer, reaching up to straighten his already perfect tie. "How are you feeling about tonight?" Marcus considered the question. 3 months ago, the thought of attending a social event would have filled him with dread. Tonight, he felt something closer to anticipation. "Ready," he said simply. The gala was being held at the Ocean View Hotel, the same venue where Marcus had attended dozens of similar events before his accident. As they pulled up to the valet stand, Marcus felt Emily's hand slip into his. "We don't have to stay long if you're uncomfortable," she said quietly. "I know, but I want to be here. With you." They made their entrance together, Marcus in his wheelchair, Emily walking beside him with her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Marcus had debated whether to use his walker for the evening. He could manage short distances now without assistance, but the wheelchair was more practical for a long evening. More importantly, he'd stopped seeing it as a symbol of limitation and started seeing it as simply a tool. The change in perspective made all the difference. "Marcus," David, his old golf partner, approached with genuine pleasure. "It's great to see you. You look fantastic." "Thanks, David. I'd like you to meet Emily Carter." "Emily, this is David Morrison." Emily stepped forward with a warm smile, extending her hand. "It's nice to meet you, David. Marcus has told me about your golf adventures." As they talked, Marcus noticed something that would have escaped him months earlier. Emily wasn't deferential or apologetic about her presence. She engaged with David as an equal, asking intelligent questions about his business, sharing her own observations about the charity's work. She claimed her space in the conversation naturally and confidently. "What do you do, Emily?" David asked. "I run my own cleaning service," Emily replied without a trace of embarrassment. "Small businesses, residential clients. It keeps me busy." Marcus felt a surge of pride. Emily had mentioned the week before that she'd decided to go out on her own rather than continue working for the larger service. It was a big step, and one that required courage he admired. "That's wonderful," David's wife said with what sounded like genuine interest. "Small business ownership is so challenging these days." As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't expected. Emily's presence beside him wasn't just emotional support. It was a reminder of who he'd become over the past few months, someone who took up space, someone who didn't apologize for existing. When they moved to their dinner table, Marcus maneuvered his wheelchair into position without the self-consciousness that had plagued him at previous events. When he needed help reaching something, he asked for it simply and without embarrassment. When people asked about his progress, he answered honestly, neither minimizing his achievements nor overselling his limitations. "You're different tonight," Emily observed during a quiet moment between courses. "Different how?" "You're not performing, you're just being yourself." Marcus realized she was right. At his own dinner party, he'd been trying to convince everyone, including himself, that nothing had changed. Tonight, he was simply present as the person he was now. "I have a good teacher," he said, squeezing Emily's hand. The evening's keynote speaker was a Paralympic athlete who talked about redefining success and finding strength in unexpected places. As Marcus listened, he thought about his own journey over the past months, not just the physical recovery, but the emotional evolution. During the dancing portion of the evening, Marcus expected to feel left out, the way he had at every social event since the accident. Instead, Emily surprised him. "Would you like to dance?" she asked. Marcus looked at his wheelchair, then at the dance floor filled with couples. "Emily, you can't dance like you used to," Emily interrupted gently. "But that doesn't mean you can't dance at all." She stood and moved behind his chair, placing her hands on his shoulders the way she had during their early therapy sessions. But this time, instead of helping him with exercises, she began to sway gently to the music. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself feel the rhythm, the warmth of Emily's hands, the connection between them that had nothing to do with walking or standing or meeting anyone else's expectations of what dancing should look like. When he opened his eyes, he realized several other couples had stopped to watch, not with pity or awkwardness, but with something that looked like appreciation for the pure emotion of the moment. "See?" Emily whispered in his ear. "Dancing isn't about your feet, it's about your heart." The drive home was quiet, both of them processing the evening. As they pulled into the driveway, Emily turned to face him. "I'm proud of you," she said. "Tonight you were completely yourself, confident, charming, present. It was beautiful to watch. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. Maybe not 6 months ago, but definitely now." Emily's smile was soft in the dim light of the car. "You don't need me to be strong anymore, Marcus. You just want me around because you care about me." "Is that okay with you?" "It's perfect." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both understanding that something significant had shifted. The last vestiges of their caregiver-patient dynamic had dissolved completely. What remained was simply two people who had chosen each other. "Emily," Marcus said quietly, "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable and completely without expectation. Emily's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too." They kissed in the front seat of the car like teenagers, gentle and sweet and full of promise. 6 weeks later, Marcus stood at the edge of the terrace, gripping his walker but supporting most of his own weight. Emily sat in a chair nearby, her mother beside her, watching with quiet pride. "You don't have to prove anything," Helen Carter said. She'd become a regular visitor since her health scare, and Marcus had grown to appreciate her direct manner and protective love for Emily. "I'm not trying to prove anything," Marcus replied, taking a careful step forward. "I'm just walking to the woman I love." He managed 15 steps across the terrace before his legs began to shake with fatigue. Emily rose from her chair and met him halfway, steadying him with gentle hands. "Show off," she said, but her eyes were bright with tears. "Only for you," Marcus replied, leaning down to kiss her. It wasn't a miracle. Marcus would always need his wheelchair for long distances, would always have good days and difficult days. But he was walking, short distances with assistance on his own terms. More importantly, he was living. Not the life he'd planned before the accident, but the life he'd built after it. A life that included work he found meaningful, relationships that sustained him, and love that had grown from the most unexpected place. "What are you thinking about?" Emily asked as they settled together on the terrace swing, Marcus's walker parked beside them. "I'm thinking about that first day when I fell trying to get to the couch." "What about it?" Marcus pulled Emily closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I'm thinking that maybe I wasn't trying to get to the couch at all. Maybe I was trying to get to you." Emily laughed, the sound bright and joyful in the evening air. That's very poetic, but you didn't even know I existed that first day. Didn't I? Marcus smiled. Maybe some part of me did. Maybe some part of me knew exactly who I was falling toward. As the sun set over the Pacific, they sat together in comfortable silence. Marcus's legs were tired from his walk. Emily's hand was warm in his, and the future stretched ahead of them full of possibilities neither had imagined 6 months earlier. Marcus had learned something important in the months since his accident. Healing wasn't about returning to who you used to be. It was about becoming who you were meant to be, even if that journey took you through places you'd never planned to go. Looking at Emily, seeing the love and acceptance in her eyes, Marcus knew he'd arrived exactly where he belonged. "Same time tomorrow?" Emily asked, echoing the question that had become their private ritual. "Same time tomorrow," Marcus confirmed, meaning not just the physical therapy, not just the exercises, but all of it, the ordinary moments and the extraordinary ones, the struggles and the victories, the day-by-day choice to build a life together. He squeezed Emily's hand, and she squeezed back, and they watched the stars come out over the ocean, two people who had found in each other exactly what they hadn't known they were looking for. A love built not on need, but on choice, not on dependency, but on partnership, not on fixing each other, but on growing together into the people they were meant to become. It was, Marcus thought, the best kind of happily ever after, the kind that was really just a beginning. Epilogue. 1 year later, Marcus and Emily were married in a small ceremony on the same terrace where they'd shared their first real dinner together. Marcus walked down the short aisle without assistance, his steps careful but confident. Emily met him halfway, as she always did. When the minister asked if anyone objected to the union, James stood up from his seat in the front row. "I object," he said solemnly, "to the fact that it took my cousin so long to realize what the rest of us could see from day one." The small gathering of family and friends erupted in laughter. Emily grinned and shook her head at James, while Marcus just smiled and pulled her closer. "Any other objections?" the minister asked, fighting his own smile. Helen Carter raised her hand. "I object to Emily wearing white when she's clearly the one who taught this stubborn man how to walk again." More laughter. Emily was crying and laughing at the same time, now, and Marcus realized his own eyes were damp. "In that case," the minister said, "you may kiss your bride." Marcus cupped Emily's face in his hands and kissed her as the sun set behind them, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. When they broke apart, Emily whispered against his lips, "Same time tomorrow?" "Same time tomorrow," Marcus whispered back, "for the rest of our lives." As they walked back down the aisle together, Emily's hand tucked securely in Marcus's arm as he navigated with his walker. Their friends and family threw flower petals and cheered. It wasn't the wedding Marcus had once imagined for himself, but it was better than anything he could have planned. It was real. It was theirs. And it was just the beginning of a love story that had started with a fall and led to the most beautiful rising either of them had ever known.